Okay, so we're recording. So I'm Jem McKenzie, K-12 District Teacher Librarian with another conversation for Social Justice Leadership class. And Khavin, I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name is Khavin. I am a college professor at North Seattle College, and yeah, really excited to be here and have these conversations.
Okay, and we chose servant leadership, and then we'll move into authentic leadership. Um, and we also somewhat discussed the 360 process at the very end of my last conversation.
Mhm.
Um, so do you want me to open it up with a definition of servant leadership, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that
Sure.
sounds great.
Okay, so servant leadership did fall into the theories of transformation cluster, and book definition from Greenleaf, 1970, of servant leadership is formal leaders should act as servants first and leaders second, reflecting a calling to give back rather than self-serving motives or an overemphasis on production. So that was the formal definition. And then one thing I shared with in my other group conversation, was that really since I've been in probably middle school, a young student, I've always for a stretch, identified as a servant leader because that's how I was kind of trained and taught leadership through student government and all the other little organizations I was involved in. But I have to say, in maybe the last decade of my life, I've I feel like language is power, and I feel like the language of servant is a little problematic. And I mean, I still identify with the behaviors of servant leadership, but I'm really appreciating the readings from this class that are helping me formalize and giving me academic language around, like I felt like there was something up that I didn't like with servant leadership, but I didn't know what until I read this chapter. There's like a formal definition, my kind of background with it. And I also love how the book is I love the deconstruction, reconstruction, how it's kind of picking apart each leadership theory. I don't know, what are your thoughts on servant leadership so far?
Yeah, well, I gotta tell you, I had a very similar thought. And the reason I did around just the idea of like the word servant, right?
Mhm.
um raising some issues. And I think for me, I grew up um in a Baptist household. We were in church every Sunday and on Wednesday. So you know I think, while I think I have my own ideas around spirituality now, um I would classify myself as a spiritual person. And I think growing up, the idea of being a servant was, or just the idea of service, right, was one that came from a place of ultimate humility.
Mhm.
So to your point, I think there's a lot of conversation that's had, that I appreciate the aspects and the attributes of what they're talking about. And I understand, a few years ago, I said something around service when we were creating a program at my last job, and someone was like, I would probably shy away from using the word service because that's problematic for a lot of reasons, and to a lot of people it's
Mhm.
triggering.
Yeah.
And like, I really appreciate that, because for me the word service comes from just like the ultimate, like being the ultimate resource for people and like providing what they need, right? And that being the guidance of how you lead and how you move through the world, right? Is really trying to be responsive to other folks' needs, particularly in these types of situations. So I was like, all right, well, I'm throwing that word out, maybe, but the aspects of servant leadership um are ones that I feel like anytime that I've been in a leadership position, I have really, really tried to work towards, right?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes when you have an organization you really believe in what you're doing and you have this mission and you have this vision and you want to make that come you want to make that come alive. And when you're partnering with communities and or working with other organizations, you know we tend to want to come in with our own ideas. We want to do this, we want to install this, we want to build that, or we want to have this event. And it's like, what you need to do instead is reach out to folks and say, hey, these are the things that we're really good at, these are the things that we have. If you need any of those things or would like to like co-create something together, or honestly, if you just need a canopy, just let us know. Right? It's whatever you need that we have like is yours. And I think that for me is kind of at the heart of leading as a like servant leadership.
I felt everything that you just said. And I think, yeah, like I said, it was only within the past decade where it was just really like what you said, that term servant or service could be problematic or could almost be offensive to some people for whatever reason. So I was like, oh no, well, now what am I going to call the type of leadership I subscribe to? And I love the readings and that, I'm trying to find myself in the readings, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, if I can't say that if I don't want to, or if the language is problematic about saying that I'm a servant leader, I'm trying to find the correct theory of all the theories. I'm like, what is the lift them up theory? Because I feel like that's what my job is, especially as a district teacher librarian. I literally run up and down the street all day long, supporting and lifting up my library aides in each building, so that they can best serve students. And I always think of, I know that our readings were mentioning about servant leadership maybe being a little problematic because it's kind of leader centric. And I'm like, I never really kind of saw it that way. You know how you can flip, usually you have a hierarchical, the traditional hierarchy of an organization has like the leader at the top, and then it goes down like this, like a triangle. I always think of it in flip. I think my job is I'm the leader at the bottom, and I'm literally here to uplift all of the people that I work with. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with servant leadership right now. I'm just looking at the time. I emailed my folks to say I'm going to be a little late. We're kind of I don't mean to rush us through things, but do you kind of want to shift to authentic leadership right now, and like your thoughts on authentic leadership and maybe how they're similar to or different from servant leadership? Or what did you grasp from the readings for authentic?
Yeah, I think what really stood out for me in the readings is how similar yet different they both really are, right? Just kind of the idea um of like being rooted in what's right, right? I think moral grounding is what the reading might have referred to. But I do think that I appreciate the process of authentic leadership, right? You can kind of be like, all right, like, is there awareness and knowing and trusting in thoughts and feelings, right? Like, what work am I doing to get rid of my bias, right? It's taking a more insular and explicit look at like, what are your lenses, right? When when I teach undergrad, and one of the things that I tell folks is like, yes, like I teach outdoor learning, for example, right? And it's like nature for young children. And I tell them like, we know, and we're gonna study and validate the advantages of young children getting outside, right? There is loads of evidence that supports that, right? What I want you to think about is, and what we're gonna focus on, is how you are coming into this work. And what biases do you have, and how can you actively work against those biases? How can you present counter narratives so that all your kids feel represented, right? And so the thing that I kind of like about the authentic leadership is that like it's drawing from different capacities, it's drawing from different experiences, and from that you are able to kind of create the lens, your best lens, to help guide. And that's also informed by everybody else in the organization. So I think I appreciate that because it feels it feels a little bit more intentional, maybe, than servant leadership. And I think it's making folks really take a good long look at themselves.
I love that you said that. I didn't quite know what to think when I first started reading the bit on authentic leadership, because it's like there's no formal definition for it. There's no empirical data that proves its effectiveness. Like, and then I'm like, well, what is this authentic
Yeah.
leadership? But I love what you just said, and that's echoing something Russell had said as well. And it's like really getting a grip on yourself as a leader, and another thing I want to say, I'm really appreciating about each different type of leadership style or theory that we're encountering. I like how every single one lists the elements or the behaviors. And that's what's helping me kind of differentiate between them. They might have overlapping similar elements or behaviors, but I think you had mentioned them. For this one, it's awareness, knowing and trusting in one's thoughts, feelings, and motives, unbiased processing, behavior, relational orientation. So those like characteristics or elements are helping me kind of sort one theory out from another.
Yeah.
Just looking at the time, is there any, I feel like we just rushed through, but not really.
No.
Is there anything that you want to share or say or pose any questions, just like as a, take a couple of minutes just to wrap up the conversation? Or maybe, is there anything we haven't touched on?
Yeah. Not particularly. I feel like kind of said all of the things that I was wanted to say and what I was thinking about. And of course, like I always reflect on my own experiences. And, I was the executive director of a nonprofit up until February. But, I had like a 5 month stint. I'd been with the organization for 6 years, but a 5 month stint as the ED. And of course, as fate would have it, we ended up having to close the organization down. So, while that's not primarily my fault at all, it does make me reflective on like, what do I want to learn from that? What do I want to take into whatever other leadership position that I have? How does leadership manifest in an organization or in a place, even if you aren't, at the head of it or at the top of it, right?
Yeah.
As a professor and as a parent educator, I am the leader in that someone is looking to me for advice, or they're looking to me to answer a question or help them solve a problem, right? So like, how can I apply these, the positive aspects of these different types of leadership to my everyday practice, right? This isn't just for principals and EDs and CEOs, right? It's for everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think about my own practice. I know we need to collect 4 surveys for the 360, but I went ahead because I really wanted to hear from people. I sent it out to my entire district, and then I'm on the board of directors for our state library organization for school libraries. So I sent it out, and I've gotten quite a few responses back, and I'm really grateful for the feedback. And I've gotten some responses from like my direct reports, or they're not my direct reports, but my library aides. So people that I'm guiding, and I've gotten feedback from my supervisor, other administrators in my district, and then just colleagues across the state. And it's like you just said, I'm really appreciative of this class and everything that we're learning, and using it to reflect on what I already know I do well, and then just kind of showing me pockets where I can improve in my practice. And I mean, that's the whole point, is to better serve the people I'm serving, and fine-tuning my leadership skills. So all right, is there anything else you want to say for the sake of this recording? Okay, then I will go ahead and hit stop on the recording.